Okay, trying this again. Um, this is yet another take of the what is it, Epstein files. Please hear me out before you turn, because I know there's so much stuff out there on the Epstein files. It makes you want to pull your hair out. This is a take I haven't heard. I'm not saying it's not out there. It's just saying that I have a life and can't listen to everything. But it is something I think is important to point out. And while we worry about who's on it and whether or not Trump's on it, and all of this stuff has been discussed in nauseum, there is a group of people that is not being discussed. And I have not heard anyone discuss this. And that is the victims who are currently being exploited in the same manner. I mean, Jerry Epstein, let's face it, didn't invent exploitation. So we know that it's still going on. And one group of people that is really paying attention to this, that is the victims who are now being exploited. And what they want to know is there justice for them here in America? Is there justice for them? Is there any, if they come forward, is there any protection from them? Are we so worried about aesthetics and whether or not powerful people are behind it that we completely forget that children are still being exploited? 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is the victim of childhood sexual abuse. And that's according to I got to read this on here, the National Center for the Victims of Crime is where I got this information. So during a 1 year period of time in the US, 16% of youth ages 14 to 17 have been sexually victimized. That's thousands of people. And that's thousands of people it's going on with right now. And what is in most important that I'm not hearing enough about and we're not focused enough about is, are the victims now being trafficked by rich and powerful people? Is there justice for them here in the United States? Are we so worried about the perpetrators and who they are and protecting them and running down and covering up for them? Are we so worried about that we fail to protect the victims? We're certainly not doing a very good job of, Epstein's victims, and they're all adults. And by the way, that's probably the only reason they've come out is because they want people to be aware that these things do happen, and sometimes in front of our noses. And so the group probably watching this process more than anyone else is the children or the young teenagers that are now being exploited. And what they want to know is if they come out, are they going to be exploited again by being ignored? Are they going to be minimized? How we react to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein is how today's victims are expected to be treated. And that's going to decide whether or not they choose to come out. I mean, of the few, you hear a few people, Farmer and several others, and then Dupree, I'm sorry, who committed suicide. I mean, you hear about them, but hundreds of girls were exploited this way, and you're not hearing anything. Why? Because the only thing worse than being raped is being raped by the system after the fact. And in America, we kind of suck at that. We're so worried about Trump and his looks and his aesthetics and blah, 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 ad nauseum. And this isn't about any of that. It doesn't matter near as much as how are we treating the victims of sexual exploitation. Because the victims, the kids that are being victimized now want to know. And all you people walking around with your great big huge crosses while you're covering up someone's crimes, how can you actually believe in the God you claim you do? What would Jesus do? You think Jesus would really cover up for Trump? If you really believed in God, I would certainly think you believed God was watching. Do you think he's okay with this? I don't. I know he's not okay with it, because it's not just the victims that underwent Epstein's sexual exploitation. It's the victims that are still being exploited today. We we have to consider that we could be sacrificing them. Because if they don't see justice, they don't see compassion for past victims that are now mostly adults and can stand up for themselves. If we don't show them any consideration. Well, how can a 14-year-old who's being trafficked by some 50-year-old pervert, how does she expect to be treated? She's watching right now. She's watching the news clips. She's watching the short takes. She's watching the TikToks and probably deciding it's better to keep quiet because nobody really gives a damn about her. They're more worried about whether or not the Johns she's sleeping with has billions of dollars. Now, if they're not, then, she might come out. But if they happen to be the type of of Epstein, chances are those girls are not coming out. While our government, our Justice Department, who, by the way, is supposed to be working for us, the American people, not for Donald Trump. Okay, I'm tired of this. They're going down there to talk to this partner of Epstein's. I mean, like, she's really going to be trustworthy. I mean, seriously? This lady say whatever she needs to say to get out of prison. Why are we? I mean, we just seem to always be excusing criminals, and we expect children, we expect teenagers to tell us to come out and expose themselves if they're being exploited now. Let's take it one step further. If there's 5 people watching us, chances are a girl under the age of 18, this is happening to them right now. How would you want the American public to behave? How would you want the lawmakers to react if it's your daughter, your niece being exploited? At this rate, you'll never know, because that's what I find the biggest shame. I find the biggest shame in these people wearing their big, gaudy, gross size crosses, praying in all these silly tongues, which, is silly because their actions are speaking much louder than their words. You're protecting a predator. You won't open the files. You're more worried about whether or not Trump is on the files than how the victims are. You're completely ignoring the victims. You're making a deal with the partner in exchange for what? And you expect your niece or your nephew or your daughter to come to you or to come out and expose the possibility that she is being exploited? I mean, unless she's a total idiot, I can say she's probably not. More important than whether or who's on the files is how we treat the victims of these crimes. And right now, I'd say that the United States is doing a pretty crappy job. And those are the people, the children that are being exploited now. Those are who's watching. That's the most important audience we have. So, MAGA Mike Johnson, keeper of the faith, I'm not sure what faith, but anyway, keeper of the faith, who protests or who professes having faith. Really, what would Jesus do? Whose side would he be on? Do you think he'd be covering for Trump? Really? I mean, Jesus is screaming so loud because y'all are ignoring him. We can hear him 3 doors down in the pagan room. Because why you people aren't listening? You're not listening to what's right. You're not doing what's right, and you know it. And what's important now are not only the past victims, but the present victims that are watching closely. Because there are present victims here in America that are being exploited, just like those girls in Epstein's case were. And they want to know whose side you're on. Are you on the side of the perpetrators? Is there really justice in America? I'd have to say right now, probably not. Yeah. And they're watching you and they're judging whether or not it's safe for them. And I'd have to say that you failed the test. If I was being exploited, I wouldn't come out. Because apparently all you're worried about is whether or not someone important is on there. You're more worried about the perpetrators than you are the victims that they exploited. And you're not even considering the victims that are still being exploited. You should act in a way that you would want to act if this was your daughter or a young woman, a young girl that you loved? What would you do if this was your loved one that was sexually trafficked by Jerry Epstein or someone like him? Because there's more out there. Trust me, there's more out there. So, how would you want the leaders of, quote, the free world, how would you like them to react to your underage daughter or niece? Or think of any underage kid that you love, male or female. These things do happen to males. How would you want the leaders of America, the Justice Department, how would you want them to respond? And I think you should respond accordingly, because the most important audience you have is them. And you are determining right now in real life, dear Congress, Senate, DOJ, you're determining now whether or not they're going to come out. By your behavior. You can speak all you want, but by your behavior. And yeah, one of them could be a child you love. That's something that you have not considered, but I think you should.